And we're back at it, back on the Blunicorn, and this time, hopefully fingers crossed, last time we're going to have all of this stuff out of the back of the car. So we're finally getting back to it after kind of a long winter, a much needed break, and honestly a much busier kind of work winter than I thought I would have, which is one of the reasons why I haven't jumped on the car sooner. But here we are, started with a nice time lapse of getting the car torn apart, getting the engine and transmission out. And let me turn the camera around and show you what's going on and what I'm trying to address and why everything had to come out again. So here's our current progress. Got all the parts laid out, clutch is out. Basically everything's been stripped out of the back of the car. The time lapse kind of took place over multiple days, but you know, IT life, shout out to everyone who's our IT guys, our sysadmin, sysengineers, Knox, you know who you are. You know how life gets. You'll start a project, you start doing something, get a call, get pulled away. And so really that time lapse took place over the last couple days during the week since I've been on call, and I've only been chipping away at it about an hour at a time. But really it only takes about 4 hours solo, more or less, to go from a running car to this. The only thing I really need help with is getting the transaxle pulled out of the car. I tried to do that on my own, but you really do need a second pair of hands because the transaxle just doesn't pull straight back. You have to pull it out and then rotate it a little bit to clear one of these lower legs. So this guy here, once that adapter plate is on, and then everything will separate cleanly. But it's much, much easier with two people, and that's really the only thing I need a second pair of hands for. Otherwise, everything else you can pretty much do solo. This does present an opportunity to kind of go back through and double check all our lines, or look for leaks. I didn't see any first pass, but I'm going to go through and double check. On the engine itself, we need to address, well, the source of our oil leaks and figure out what's happening and where our oil pressure is disappearing. Previously, underneath this valley cover, the DOD ports, or displacement on demand ports, on the pedestals were open and they were just blowing oil. Because that's a change they made from the LS3 to the LS7. This plate is an LS7 part and doesn't have provisions to block those DOD ports like O-rings, etc. However, I did get a kit from Texas Speed, which has little aluminum plugs that you just tap into place. I was worried that one of those had blown out. It hadn't. Those are all still in place, still stuck, and this plate prevents them from basically coming back up. So it's definitely not that. I did take the opportunity to already pull it, double check, clean up all the surfaces, and replace the gasket under here just in case. I pulled, well, I should say when I pulled the engine out, I did see some oil in the bell housing, just a little bit in the bell housing of the transmission. Now that could have been from the previous oil problems that were leaking from up here. It could be from our rear main seal, but that seems dry. And I'm not seeing any oil leaks from underneath this rear main cover. But I'm still going to pull it. I'm still going to replace the seal, and I'm still going to replace this gasket behind there. And I'm also going to take the opportunity to double check the dumbbell, which sits right back here behind this panel, which diverts oil flow down to your filter and then back up through your main galleys. I just want to verify that that's in position and working okay. Because if there's an issue with that, you'll also see a drop in oil pressure. And that'll pretty much be everything on the back side of the motor. I'm probably going to take apart the front just real quick, pull the belts, pull the pulley, everything, all the accessory drive, everything off the front, water pump, etc. Before I put this on the hoist and deal with the oil pan, again, back down in here, I can see some oil on the front cover, and I noticed some oil when I unplugged my cam sensor when I was pulling the engine. So there's a leak somewhere up here that is active. I'm not sure where it's from, if it's the front main seal, if it's where it seals against the oil pan. Down here I can see some oil wicking. So all of that needs to be addressed. So in order to do that, I need to pull everything off the front here, and then I'll probably use my engine hoist to put the engine up in the air so we can address everything underneath it. Hey, we're back. That was kind of a weird cut, but let me quickly spin you a tale of misadventure and woe. So the tail end of that time lapse was me struggling to remove an an ATI damper hub from the front of the engine. And for the life of me, no matter what, I couldn't get that damper removed. I was able to get the damper shell off, but the hub was firmly stuck to the crank snout of the engine. And the whole goal of this process was to try and figure out where I was leaking oil. And I wanted to redo every seal. I wanted to redo every tolerance. I wanted to reseat the front and rear covers, the oil pump. And to do that, I had to remove that damper hub. Well, fast forward through a number of broken tools, broken Torx bits. I broke 2 pullers attempting to remove the hub from the crank snout. Even like proper hub removal tools just bent and laughed in the face of this thing. So eventually, I just had to butcher it. So you can see the splits where I had to cut it, and then I hammered a chisel into that split and it cracked it right clean through, and then I was able to remove the hub. Now if you can clearly see, the engine's back in, the trans is back in. But this is the result of a week-long ordeal. Once I had that hub off, I was, very easily able to replace all the gaskets. You can see all the old gaskets there. I cleaned off every mating surface, reapplied the RTV in the corners where you have kind of a triple joint between the rear cover, the oil pan, etc. And let all that dry. Everything's buttoned up, everything's torqued down. Cool, engine's ready to go. Hopefully everything stays dry. We get the motor put in the car, and we notice a gasoline smell, a strong gasoline smell. and come out overnight, and we find gasoline pooling just ever so slightly under the car. Look all around, this side's good, all the fittings are good. Maybe it was just from disconnecting our fuel lines here, and there was some fuel in the pan, but it's still going. Turns out the fittings all the way down there behind the oil tank were weeping. Which, if you know what a bulkhead fitting looks like, is, well, it looks kind of like this, except not a 90 degree. And on one side, it's a fixed nut, and on the other side, you have a nut to tighten it against that bulkhead. So a little closer look there. So if this were the fuel tank, where this nut is on the inside, and on the outside, I have the nut to tighten it in. However, as you can see, I can't reach the inside of the tank, at least not without trouble. So I had to remove this top plate, remove the fuel sender here, reach my arm down in a tank full of gas to try and tighten that, and I couldn't. So then the engine and transmission had to come back out. We had to pull the oil tank to get to those fittings that are behind it. We had to drain the fuel from the tank so that it would expose the hole so it wouldn't just spray gas everywhere. And then once again, we had to pull the cover plate, and I could reach my hand down in there and hold it while I tightened it from the outside, having removed all of the lines. And then for the third time, button everything back up. We let it sit overnight. We didn't put the motor in right away. We let it sit overnight, put towels down on down in the chassis, on the fittings, and they came up dry overnight. So because it was dry, now we could finally put everything back together. So just today's little excursion was getting the engine back in, getting the transmission back in, getting all of that fully torqued down and bolted up, getting all of our oil lines connected. So like down here for our dry sump lines, and then our oil filter here, getting that in place. Oh, that was the other thing, is while everything was out, I double checked as many lines as I could for pressure, do a pressure test and a leak down test. I thought one of these lines was leaking, and that's where my leak was coming from. But when I pressure tested them, they were fine. However, these jackets, actually if we look in the trash here, you can see the end of the jacket, it's just soaked with oil. And that's from previous fire up when we forgot to tighten these fittings here. And all it did was fill these jackets with oil, which doesn't really help on a fireproof jacket. Makes it kind of a fire-prone jacket. So I had to replace those, tested the lines were good, all that's good. The engine has, well, I should say the tank has 7 quarts in it, which is all going to drain back into the motor anyhow. And if it stays dry overnight, then I'm going to continue assembly and we'll get everything put back together. Otherwise, we'll have to drain it and figure out where we have our oil leak. But the whole point of this story was what was supposed to be just a quick in and out to get that, you know, oil seals, pan seals, etc. done, turned into a huge ordeal that involved the fuel tank fittings and oil lines and pressure tests and just lots of things not working out like I wanted them to and taking longer than I wanted to. And while I'm sure that would have made great video, it was incredibly frustrating, and I was just doing my best to stay calm through the whole process. And I mean, as you can see, this is where we're at right now, but it makes for kind of a weird video because there's a huge cut in the middle where most of the work took place, but that's how it is. I just really didn't feel like videoing all that mess at the time. And it would be hard to explain it all through the process anyway. So, where we're at right now is we have the drivetrain in the car, got oil in, got fuel back in the car, if it remains dry overnight. All of this mess, all this on the floor, which is our exhaust, everything else, our intake can go back on the motor, and with any luck we'll have this up and driving around within the week. We may need to revisit some tune options, because one of the things we found on the dyno was what's on the other side of our intake here, but I'm not sure if I mentioned before, but the map sensor is bad. So what we found on the dyno is the map sensor is constantly reporting a vacuum. It's saying it's like at 80 pascals instead of 105 or 107, whatever it is down here at ocean level. It always thinks the engine has a vacuum. So it might be a little weird when we plug in a new sensor and everything's operating correctly, and it might have to relearn the tune and idle and stuff. So it might be a little rocky start, but it should tune through that pretty easily, just with a little seat time. And then other than that, just a few little button-ups here and there. Again, we're going to make sure everything runs clean and dry. But yeah, here's hoping we have the car ready once again for, let's say, fingers crossed, the last dyno day. But I'm certainly going to drive it around more, try to push it a little bit now that we're kind of like halfway through the tune. And try to, make sure we don't blow another oil seal or anything like that. So I really don't want to have another dyno problem. Third time charm. We'll see. That's it for now. It's been a hectic 2 months since Christmas. Just lots going on, both work and home. And unfortunately, none of it's really been car stuff. It's just been busy. I'm really hoping some of that settles down, because I really want to get on the cars. I know the coilovers for the Honda are showing up next week, so a lot of our Honda mess can go away. Get that buttoned up, get the Ultima buttoned up. We really need to go through the garage and just clean it from, 3 project cars worth of cruft floating around. So probably gonna burn an episode on that, just getting everything sorted. But yeah, hopefully from now forward, we can get some regular updates going. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.